Hello everybody, my name's James, and for the benefit of those listening to the audio, you're listening to Ask James, my regular YouTube live stream where I welcome questions from the YouTube community on anything football related. To timestamp this, it's just gone 2 p.m. on Friday, October the 18th, 2024, with obviously the game week 8 deadline ahead of us tomorrow morning. Got nothing specifically I want to cover, so I'll get straight into the questions, which will cover up to 2:55 p.m. UK time. AC7 says, hi James, would you swap Havertz for Solanke? Is that Solanke in for Havertz? I wouldn't buy Havertz for Solanke at this stage. The other way round, Solanke for Havertz, yeah, I think fine. There's a little bit of doubt, obviously, Havertz over tomorrow. I imagine it's probably the usual with Arsenal, and he probably will play. But there is obviously a little bit of a doubt around him. That also gives you a little bit of an excuse. I think if you want to make that move, I imagine Solanke, I guess the models would probably have him as likely second highest scoring forward in fantasy over the next 4 weeks. I won't need to tell you who will be top of that metric, but yeah, I would probably make the move personally. Darren Jenkins says, hi James, if wouldn't mind answering 2 questions, which back three from Gabriel, Saliba, Lewis, Mikalenko and Milenkovic would you choose this week? I'd pick the players from the best teams there, mate, so Gabriel, Saliba and Lewis, and also Delap or DCL for 8, 9, 10 before going to Strand, Larson. If we're just going over the next 3, I would have a little bit of favouritism there for Delap. 2 home fixtures versus 1. Lemon says, afternoon James, not as brave silly as you, delete as appropriate, probably silly, and bringing in the robot. Need a 6.3 million midfielder, idea was Garnacho. 2 punty question, better option for less, thanks and best of luck this week, best of luck to you too. Yeah, I'd very much earmarked wanting to go to Garnacho at this point. And that would have been based on kind of a projection pre-season of wanting to go there now. I'm not feeling it. I think the players that you'd want, like Brennan Johnson, are a little bit above that. So you're into a region that you possibly don't want to be in. So, yes, it's punty. The fixtures are good for a sustained period. We do know that he's trained this week, so it's good news. So I'd be very surprised if he doesn't start tomorrow, actually. So if you're buying in that zone, I would say yes, but I would also say consider coming right down, even to the likes of Tyler Dibling, which is perfectly reasonable to use this week, particularly with Southampton at home to Leicester, and you could use that money better elsewhere in forthcoming weeks. But if you are buying specifically in that range of sort of 6 to 6.3, I guess there's not too much there really to want to go and punt at this moment, bar a Garnacho. Smith Rowe, good fixtures for a little bit. If you don't own, I don't know if that's a player you'd want long term. Boomer is obviously in excess of that. I wouldn't want to be punting Kevin Sade for this particular week. Did play through the middle last week, even though I quite fancy Brentford to do well tomorrow. That doesn't feel right. So I don't mind the Garnacho punt. I almost feel like you're describing it yourself as well, and it is punty, right? But I don't mind it. I do still hold the belief that there will come a point this season where a lot of us want to get him. So you might be ahead of the curve. FPL Don says, hi James, glad us crazy non-Haaland owners still have a content creator to watch. I haven't got Unai Emery's press conference information yet, so it's not definitive, but many of you might have heard on Black Box last night. Shout out to Az for letting me stand in for Mark on the brilliant Black Box last night. You might have heard on that, or you might have heard on our Patreon content this morning that, yeah, I'm going against, as long as Unai Emery doesn't give me something scary about Ollie Watkins, which I'm not anticipating. So, yeah, the plan's still to take it on. That might change next week ahead of the Southampton game, but there isn't any intention to change it. That's how I honestly feel at the moment. He says, if your rank wasn't as good, would you have a different mindset in continuing to take him on? It's a good question. I'm trying to be aggressive with what I'm doing. Taking on the most formidable player in the game is one aggressive, but perhaps maybe not aggressive enough on the captaincy. Depends how you spin that narrative. I think it's very fair to say, if I was ranked 3-4 million at the moment, would I be putting him in? Probably yes, because I'd be really fearful that the gap would get bigger. I'm expecting to lose rank over the next couple of weeks, right? Because I don't own him. I think he'll do great in these 2 weeks. Me not going there isn't, I think he's shit or he's not going to do well. I know what he's capable of. If I was in a position where I was really concerned rank-wise at the moment, I probably would have brought him in, actually, and just try and climb that ladder. Arguably a bit slower, but also just stop the gap getting bigger. So, yeah, it's a good question. Probably yes. In all seriousness, I probably would. I'm on a strategy which has worked okay for me so far. I have the will and intention to want to carry on going against that. Yeah, if I was unhappy with my rank, yeah, it's very fair to say that I possibly would be bringing him in. It's interesting. I'd not considered it. Good question. Ben Thomas says, hi James, is Garnacho still in your plans? Chasing rank feels like a decent punt. I'm going to skip that, Ben, because I feel like I've just answered that question basically for Lemons, but yeah, he is still on radar, but I would say, in all honesty, at this moment in time, also under no consideration personally at the moment. I would buy Brennan Johnson for a little bit more. Let's sell that. So maybe you're both in that position where you've either got Johnson or you're not able to get there. Darren Jenkins says, sorry James, one more question. Would you go Saka or Foden for next 4 game weeks? I kind of said on Black Box last night, if I was on wildcard, I would go Foden at this moment in time. I would chance it, but I'm not going to move Saka to Foden, knowing that I want to move that back. Unless something was to come out tonight and say to me definitively, yeah, do you know what? We know he hasn't travelled. I'm going to be really honest with you. I think if that's the case, I don't think I'm buying Foden. I think I'll just be going Brennan Johnson. I'll just park the money for a bit. That's the backup contingency plan for me at the moment. But unless there was something definitive that tells me Saka hasn't travelled, then there's no intention for me to move him on at the moment. Richard F says, loved hearing you on the lab with Flav. Cheers, mate. I really appreciate that. So if you don't know what that's all about, so the Flav is the lab is part of the Fighting Cock podcast, the Tottenham podcast that I followed a lot. Particularly before I podcasted, I didn't have the opportunity to listen to it as much as I used to. But yeah, I did a podcast on that with Flav very recently that was very enjoyable. So thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Richard. Eddie R says, hey James, 2 free transfers. Would you do Trent and Semenyo to Aït-Nouri and Foden/Son, or just roll and bench Semenyo for Rodgers? If I do the moves, I'll start Greaves and bench Rodgers. Foden, Son to Palmer in game week 12. Cheers. So get that. So you're trying to set on fixtures here. I completely understand that. And my instinct reading all of that, Eddie, was to say no, but you might have tipped it at the end because you've obviously got a plan there that's part of getting Cole Palmer in. And I understand that. If it was Foden or Son at this moment, I'd be going Foden. I'd chance it. I think at any point you might feel concerned with KDB back, who it sounds like he's just, by the way, missing out this week. He doesn't sound like he's far away. Sounds like he won't play. Yeah, I understand the priority of fixing towards getting Cole Palmer, but my instinct on that is probably, Eddie, it's going to be biased by my own team, naturally, and I don't want to move Trent on at the moment, personally. So, at the moment, I would say, roll. Play Rodgers this week, perfectly reasonable. And if you come to the conclusion, oh my God, next week, Trent's got Arsenal away and you still want to go Foden over Southampton because he's impressed you this week, I think you can still make that move. And obviously, you don't really want to use Aït-Nouri this week either. So it feels like one, Eddie. Remember, we can go to free transfers now. It feels like a roll. And you might be in here asking the same question next week, mate. JP says, Saka to Foden next week. False. Yeah, I'll consider it. One of the reasons for me not going to Haaland as well is knowing that I completely cut myself off of Foden if in the event, as just said Freddie, Foden really impresses tomorrow and it's like, I want to get him in and maybe for me even captain him next week. There isn't intention to do that, but I'd like to leave that potential possibility open. So the plan for me at the moment, JP, would be no, but I might sit in this time next week and say, yeah, I'm doing it. Eddie has gone on and says, or as alternatives, keep Trent and just do Semenyo to Maddison and complete the Spurs attacking triple up of Madders, Brennan and Solanke. No, I don't think you want a Spurs triple up offensively. I think we didn't cover it on Black Box last night, and I know a few people were asking, so I've looked back through some of the chat, and I know a few were asking about Maddison and Kulusevski rather than Johnson. It's definitely Johnson at this moment. He's in form. Is good fixtures coming up for Tottenham. Would I want to add Maddison or Kulusevski to that at this moment? Honestly, no. No. If I was going to Tottenham attackers, it would be Solanke and Johnson. I wouldn't be comfortable having the three, just looking at that fixture at Manchester City in game week 12, personally. Hasselbanki's win says, hey Friday James, who's a player who you thought was shit for a while but changed your opinion and turned out to be a top player? Oh my god. I'm drawn to think of Tottenham players. The first name that comes to my mind, people will take this out of context, fair enough. He obviously wasn't shit, but I would have been quite happy to cut my losses on Luka Modric after a few months at Tottenham. I just didn't think he was going to be strong enough for the league, basically. So, I mean, that's a really good example of one, I think, who turned out to be one of the best midfielders of this century so far, I think. Won it all in the game and deserved to do so. So, maybe that's... But I never thought he was shit. I just didn't think he'd be strong enough for our league. I didn't think he was a wide player, which is where he was regularly playing for us. I didn't think he'd had enough attacking returns to play as a 10, where he also played sometimes. Definitely never thought he'd be strong enough to play central midfield. I got that wildly wrong, mate. Who's next? Richard's got back. More on the Lab and Flab. Any chance we can expect you on other Spurs pods? Extra Inch, perhaps? Look, I'm always open if any of the guys, Extra Inch or any of the other Tottenham podcasts want to invite me on to talk about Tottenham. Tell them. Get in touch with them and say, I know this guy. You know, I'd love you to have a chat with him about Tottenham. Tell him, Richard. I'm always open, mate. I need advance warning most of the time. But yeah, tell him. JP says, hold DCL or sell to Jimenez Cunha next game week. JP, it sounds like you got questions in, mate, because you want to roll a transfer this week. And yeah, see how you feel next week, mate. But Cunha, I've been quite clear, is very high on my radar. And it would be a similar move, Vardy to Cunha. I've got in mind for next week or 10. So I'm only going to say that, mate. Tim Johnson says, hi mate, 2 free transfers. Would you sell Diaz down to Johnson or even a Smith Rowe this week? Would allow me to move Saka to Palmer if when I choose. That's a clincher then, I think. To say, yes, I don't mind if you want to move Diaz to Johnson at the moment, if it's going to allow you Palmer down the line. Otherwise, I probably would say, no, just stick it out with Diaz. I've been clear for all of this international break. I think there'll be goals in that game on Sunday at Anfield. So I don't fear having the attacking players, that includes Cole Palmer, in that particular fixture. So if you didn't have the forward-thinking plan, I would just say carry on. But yeah, bearing in mind what you said, yeah, Diaz to Johnson, go for it, mate. JK Gooner says, says, hi James, hope you're all well. Would you prefer Johnson over Foden or Rodgers over Fernandes? Playing one of these moves. Oh, I see. Sorry. Johnson to Foden or Rodgers to Fernandes. Planned one of these moves, but now tempted to roll. Yeah. Yeah. Similar. I mean, I could go... I was going to say I could go Johnson to Fernandes. I don't own Johnson. I can't, by the way. I can't go Jota to Foden. I don't quite have enough. I don't think I would have done it anyway, actually. No, roll, I think... Rodgers' fixture this week's okay. Johnson's fixture's good. Seek a little bit more information feels right. Fernandes really... Again, I was considering a strategy where I'd be getting him in and captain him this week. It's not really entered my mind during this break. It just doesn't feel like I can go there at the moment. I do think one of the 4 Manchester United players probably will do well over the next 5-6 weeks. I don't think there's any guarantee it would be Fernandes, and I wouldn't like to guess really between Garnacho, Rashford and Haaland. If I had to go one, it would be, as others have mentioned, probably Garnacho. But yeah, I'm not high on them tomorrow either, so I'd be steering off United. No, it sounds like a roll to me, mate. Colin Johnson says, hi James, hope you are well. Play 2 of Smith Rowe or Raul Jimenez or Rodgers. Be the Fulham players, mate. I see Joachim Anderson's been past fit. Again, not seen the Aston Villa news at the time of recording. We'll see if maybe something's come in now. Not as yet. Unai Emery's always last. But yeah, I'd probably favour the Fulham players, actually. I don't think Fulham will get beat tomorrow. FPL Stew says, hi James, any news on Matt Sells? Would you transfer him out? No, I'd be holding, mate. I think he has been pictured in training. There's a photo that's been going around of Forest players coming out of a building together looking like they're going onto the pitch, and he's been spotted in that. Game's not till Monday. I imagine you'll probably play, mate, so no, I'd be holding on, mate. I think that's a decent goalkeeper option at that value, so no, I'd leave it be, mate. JP says, is Watkins a season keep, or should hop on, hop off with the Champions League fixtures seemingly draining Villa? So look, Watkins is a great long-term option, clear. I don't even think, I don't feel too concerned by Duran's performances. I feel like it's something that could develop to be in and play together. It may eat into some of Watkins' minutes. It's a decision for me possibly to make around about game week 10, I think, when Watkins goes to Tottenham and goes to Liverpool. But it's another one. I probably want him back in game week 12 under my own strategy. So I'm probably going to hold him through. I don't think any player we could look at definitively and say he's got to stay there all season. I don't think we ever have to draw those conclusions. I think there are some, those who got on Palmer at the midway point last year at stupidness, excuse me, sort of low 5 point zone. We're obviously never going to sell him, clearly. But unless you've got an asset like that really pulls through, I don't think you could definitively say, oh, Watkins is someone that I definitely want to keep. Particularly when at cheaper you can have Isak, Solanke, Jackson, Cunha's got really good fixtures coming up. I don't think you could look at it definitively and say, yeah, he's definitely sticking for me. I'm not looking at it from that perspective. I do look at it and think, and Havertz is another name there, obviously, where I do want two forwards at that constantly, ideally, in that range between Watkins at the top and I guess it's probably going to be Jackson at the bottom. I do want two of them constantly, but I'm happy to flip between them. So I wouldn't look at Watkins. You need to be set well to do that. I wouldn't look at Watkins definitively as a got to stick all season. I don't really look at any player like that. I guess I'm growing towards that position with Cole Palmer, but also look at Cole Palmer. I mean, them fixtures up till game week 28, once you hit game week 12, are stunning. Everyone who hasn't got Palmer's going, I want to get there in game week 12, right? So, I wouldn't be having intention to move him on. Here's an interesting thing on Cole Palmer, though. He's on 3 yellow cards. So, be interesting when that 5th one falls. Would be interesting if you got that 5th yellow card against Arsenal in game week 11, wouldn't it? How that would change people's plans. Or would people even get effective if he's suddenly sitting on 4 yellows? I need to be conscious of that as well, because obviously I'm if I continue to take Haaland on, I'm obviously going to use him quite a bit for captaincy. So, yeah. Who's next? Next is Lemon. Says, as a Spurs fan, why are you not convinced on Son? Is that true? If definitely fit? Not sure I quite understand the question. He'll play tomorrow. As far as I'm aware, he's trained. So he's in videos of training this week. So I'm pretty confident that he'll be back. He'll captain the team and he'll start tomorrow. If you're asking me from a fantasy perspective, I just don't think he's worth that value at the moment. I really don't. I've honestly, if Son and Johnson were both 8 million at this moment, it'd be close which one I was buying. So let me sell it that way. Heung-min Son is how much more than Brennan Johnson at the moment? Son's just not worth it. I go back to a conversation I had with Suj, ironically, last year, and then he did haul against Newcastle, which then was like, oh. But long term, I don't think if he's going to play off the left, he's going to hold that touchline quite a lot. And with Richarlison back fit, Solanke obviously going to be the main number 9 now. He's not going to play through the middle much. I'm not convinced that it'll be a popular asset at any point this season, actually. So, look, if you want to go there because you want to punt Heung-min Son for the next 4 weeks and then chain that onto Palmer, well, yeah, I guess you could be more assured of his minutes rather than Phil Foden. I'm just saying, for me personally at the moment, if he was priced the same as Johnson, I'd still be considering Johnson. Son will probably be the first one that gets subbed tomorrow. Aaron Hill says, hi James, if Visser is back, could he be the budget forward of choice if buying next game with Cheers? Yeah, and my biggest reason right now, maybe not to dive into Cunha too quickly, is exactly that. One difference with Visser and Cunha is I think Cunha's run will last longer, whereas Visser will feel like a sell in game week 14. specifically, actually, I think. Whereas Cunha's lasts longer. But yeah, it could well be that Visser gets minutes tomorrow, which I suspect he probably won't, by the way, and it'll make it difficult. But if he does, yes, I may look next week and go, well, rather than Cunha, Visser had been the plan. When I bought Vardy, the player that I was planning to go to at that point was Visser, so it might come full circle for me. So yeah, I won't rule that one out. I've got Cunha very much in mind, though, as discussed plenty of times. But yeah, if you were going in next week, you're walking straight into Ipswich at home, and then there's a good few fixtures, pretty much. I mean, that run 9 to 13 is great for Brentford, right? Includes home games against Ipswich, Leicester, and Bournemouth, trips to Fulham and Everton. That's a great set of 5 fixtures if you're going in for those 5. Cunha not so great next week, Brighton away, although it's reasonable. Then that run for Wolves is great up until the new year. So it might come down to whether you want to invest short term or long term. And in 14, I wouldn't want to go Visser to Cunha. Psychological. It'd be psychological, but you think, I've already missed like Southampton at home, Palace at home. I've missed some of the good ones already. I'd probably then be looking at a different player. But that's not to say you shouldn't necessarily do that. So yeah, if he gets minutes tomorrow, he'll come under consideration for me. Next up is 1877 WWFC. This is what to do with Diaz. Free transfers. Basic wildcard team already. Hold for 1 week before Palmer or sell now. No, I'd kind of covered for someone else earlier. It's probably hold at the moment. And if you're not sure where you want to go, it's carry on, isn't it? Michelle Banks says, hi James, should I hold Amad Diallo? If not, who to replace? Have 1.2 million in the bank and 1 free transfer. Front three of Haaland, Welbeck and Wood. Only Spurs have Van der Ven. Thanks. The 1.2 in the bank is not going to get you to a Tottenham midfielder of interest, is it? I think you're going to want to come off of... They're both fine at the moment, by the way, Welbeck and Wood. You might want to move Welbeck to something a bit stronger, though, in the near future. I'm trying to think, can you get that up to Solanke by going Dibbling now? Yeah, I'm wondering that. And in fact, I'm wondering in my mind, if you went Diallo to Dibbling now, you could obviously play Dibbling this week, makes you stronger. I don't know what that means you'd be benching. But then it would therefore, on top of that, Welbeck to Solanke, if that works. I'm not sure, it might not. But if it does, would that be worth a -4? And arguably maybe it is. So I tell you what, Michelle, I think if you could get Welbeck to Solanke, yeah, Ahmad to Dibbling, I think. No, I don't think there's a reason to hold on to Diallo, personally. It wasn't starting definitively anyway. You got Rasmus Højlund's back available now as well. So, no, I think that's a move on. Elron Cupboard says, will Man City start keeping clean sheets? $50 million question right there, mate. Probably not. No, Rodri. Wouldn't be surprised at all. 3-1's the prediction for Sunday. Wouldn't be surprised if it's like 4-5-1 against Southampton next week. Rico Lewis is on radar for me. He's not far from my thoughts, but no, don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if City don't have the volume of clean sheets that you'd ordinarily expect. They're missing the best defensive midfield player in the world. Ellie Aviv says, hi James, thanks for the great content. Would you do Salah to Foden this week? No need to fund other moves. If not, probably roll and do Salah to Palmer next game week. I think Salah's the next best captaincy after Haaland this week. Yeah, I think Salah's a better captaincy choice than Foden. Chelsea at home, keep saying it. I think there'll be goals in the game. If I had Mo in and didn't have Haaland, the armband would be going on Mo for me this week. So, no, that's a definite role for me. Next week, with Salah going to Arsenal, is going to feel like a nicer time to move that on, I think. And you've also got a bit more information on Foden and De Bruyne. You might decide a different route. Mark Penter says, sell Havertz or Watkins to fund Haaland. Thanks, James. Have a good day. That's not an easy call. I think probably the answer to that probably lies, Mark, in what your thoughts are on Arsenal assets long term. So if you're thinking about free Arsenal assets, and you probably will want free Arsenal assets once you get to game week 12 and start moving forward, who do you want in your ideal world? Who's those free? Now, you might want to go double defensive. And if you do, right, move on Havertz, but you might also not be able to get the Saka. It depends on your structure quite a bit, right? You might have decided Havertz is your go-to Arsenal attacker rather than Saka in your plans, in which case I wouldn't sell Havertz. So it probably depends a little bit on the rest of your team, Mark, rather than just a straightforward sell Watkins or sell Havertz, because on the face of it, I wouldn't particularly want to sell either. For me, it would have been Watkins. Obviously, don't own Havertz, but I'd also had to sell Saka as part of that. Wasn't comfortable. So I think it depends probably on your longer term view of the Arsenal assets is where you'll find your answer there. LFC BSFC says Salah and Vissa out for Dibbling and Haaland -4, or Vissa to Solanke for free, getting cold feet over the robot. Look, I'm not going to answer that question. I'll tell you why I'm not going to answer that question. It relates back to something I've been saying over pretty much all season. You need to have the stomach to be able to take Haaland on. I don't advise anybody else to do it because it doesn't feel great, right? When you don't own him and he returns, it hits, right? So I can't tell you how you're going to feel as an individual. If you generally have FOMO about it, just get Haaland, mate. And the move you're considering, I understand under the circumstance, although Vissa may be back next week, is just discussed. And Mo, I still think is reasonable this week as well. Some of the models have Salah, I think, even quite close to Haaland this week. And then you'll factor in the 4-point hit as part of that as well. And be careful. Dibbling a great option for this week, as covered previously. But ultimately, this comes down to how you feel about Haaland. And that's not... Like, if you're like, oh, I can't take it on, there's nothing to be, like, ashamed about that or anything like that. It's perfectly normal and reasonable. You need to have the stomach to understand, right, that he's going to kill me. He is going to kill me this week, next week, maybe both. Very unlikely neither. I'm aware of it. I'm on a long-term strategy of what I'm planning to do. And I may end up changing that strategy. I very nearly did this week. A lot of others are going there this week, and I understand the reasons why. So, but what's cold feet? Winter's coming, mate. I don't know. I can't really answer that question for you because I think it's down to every individual. How do they independently feel about being with and without Erling Haaland? I keep saying I like my team better without looking at him in it. So that actually makes the decision straightforward for me. If you don't feel that way, generally the advice is put him in. And you'll sleep better, probably. Gazman says, afternoon, James. Guessing the Rodgers versus Dibbling question will get asked be on the screen. So just good luck this week. Wrong stream, Gazman. But yeah, it would be close. I'd probably play Dibbling over Rodgers this week. Fixture. King of Mandalore says, will Richarlison take minute starts from Solanke? I would imagine there's a fair chance here that Richarlison will be starting Europa League games. That's a possibility. Will he take minutes from him? Yeah, of course. But not significant, not to the extent I would be surprised. We haven't seen it yet, so we can't say definitively. But I would be surprised if we were in a situation where Tottenham are playing Aston Villa at home in a couple of weeks and Tottenham are 2-1 down and Ange's solution to that is to bring Richarlison on for Solanke with 25 minutes to go. I'd be surprised. I'd think under that circumstance, you're more likely to just play the two of them. In scenarios where games are won, you can certainly expect that change. You have Tottenham, same game, 15 minutes to go, Tottenham winning 2-0. Yeah, I think you can probably expect that sort of change. I think in the immediate, it's more likely you might even see Richarlison play wide if he gets on the pitch tomorrow. None of us are going to know how many minutes Son will be able to get through, right? It might be that, I would imagine Son doesn't do 90 tomorrow. You're probably looking at 70, 75 at a guess. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's the opening to, right, Richarlison play 15, 20 minutes on the left. And Richarlison can play wide, right? Evertonians will certainly tell you that. So will Watford fans. So I don't think it's a big enough... Let me put it this way. He's no bigger a threat than, say, Duran and Watkins at the moment. And I don't feel that concerned. So, no, I've been clear. I think Solanke is a great option for anyone who wants to go and invest there. And for those who saw Black Box last night, it was clear that if I was buying one Tottenham attacker right now and didn't have either, subject to what you want to sell, if it's blank canvas, I'd still go to Solanke first. And to be clear on that. CM Punk 2310 says, hey James, best 5.7 mid for the foreseeable future. 10 or so game weeks. McNeil, Smith Rowe, Semenyo. 10 or so game weeks. 5.7 or less. I'd say one to keep an eye on, although I suspect he might not start on Sunday, is Carlos Forbes at Wolves, just because of the long-term nature of your question. I'd love to give you an answer on an Ipswich player, but I'm not really feeling any of them at the moment. If you're really looking over a period of 10 game weeks, it's still Semenyo. Semenyo or Rodgers are still the ones, really, I think. Ricky Young says, times are hard. Start Lewis Hall or Greaves. Already starting David. David who, Ricky? Just David. David Luiz? David Luiz, Sideshow Bob. Not to be confused with Wout Fass. Start Lewis Hall or Graves. Close that. My instinct is Newcastle at home. Possibly yes. Ipswich Everton does feel like it would probably be low scoring as well. I don't actually see either of those games being particularly high scoring. Is Greaves a bigger threat offensively than maybe Hall might be? Yeah, maybe yes. Maybe yes. I think Everton have had a little bit more vulnerability, I think, from set plays. I mean, even like the panic of Tarkowski. Was it Tonali fouled for the penalty the other week? They conceded an ugly goal from a set play against Crystal Palace as well. Yeah, maybe Greaves, as close that. But yeah, mate, I'm just trying to think which one is more likely to like return big. I suppose that's Greaves, I think. For Greendale says, hi mate, sorry, boring benching question. Rodgers or Mikalenko? Fulham defence is good. I can see a Rodgers 2-3 pointer for sure. You're also saying to me, therefore, I think, without saying to me that you think Everton will keep a clean sheet. If that's how you feel, that'll answer your question. But yeah, I'd be playing Rodgers, mate. Horia says, hello James, should I buy McNeil for Semenyo this week or just roll? I only have one free transfer and I up a Trent sell in the coming week. So yeah, on that basis then, I don't want to say waste, that would be really unfair. But if you are looking to downgrade Trent next week, then it might not be Semenyo to McNeil, right? It might be Semenyo to Bumo. I don't know what's in your team, for example. But that feels like a roll then for me. Let's remember, this is still a player who really looks like he could be the talisman for Bournemouth. If we compare, say, Semenyo and Rodgers, like Rodgers is definitely not going to be Villa's highest scoring player. I think we could all probably agree it's probably going to be Ollie Watkins, right? Subject to injury and that kind of thing. Semenyo might really outscore Rodgers because he might just be the man at Bournemouth. So I wouldn't necessarily move that on. I think I can understand with McNeil, it's like if you want to go there, it's probably sooner rather than later. It's a good fixture. How many good fixtures you're going to keep past and understand that. Feels like, Horia, there might be a bit more for you in rolling there, I think. FPL Cockney Red says, hi James, would you do one? João Pedro, yeah, that. Probably. I'm frustrated people still having him, to be honest. João Pedro and Eze for Johnson from -4. Have exact money. Who's the other player, mate? Is it just like an enabler? No, it shouldn't be. Johnson's cheaper than Eze. Okay. 2. Roll and start Semenyo and hope I can still afford it next week. 3. Just owe Pedro to Wood or Jimenez for free. I mean, I don't know what other player you're buying, mate. So I'm still tempted to say the -4. I really think João Pedro should be moved on. I really do. Paul Murray says, happy Friday, James. Rodgers or Smith Rowe? Conte or Robinson? Cheers, mate. Again, this answer for someone else earlier. A little bit of favouritism with the Fulham players. Here we go. Just a little bit of information on Aston Villa. Unai Emery on his squad ahead of the trip to Craven Cottage from Ben Dinnery's timeline. Kamara and Mings are available and are going to try. So they're obviously not going to start, but be involved. McGinn is training normally and feeling good. Concert is also feeling good. I think it's the first time this year we more or less have every player available. Amadou Onana is available as well. Philogene Bidance is also feeling good. So it sounds like clean bill of health for Aston Villa, which is good news for them. for the trip to Craven Cottage tomorrow, but still the Fulham players. Felix Hope says, hi James, free transfers considering Jackson, Havertz, Semenyo for Solanke, Cunha and Foden. Starting Dibbling is a part of that, I presume, over Cunha. Other options, just moving out Semenyo for Brennan Johnson. Prefer that, mate. Yeah, I prefer that. Jacob NH says, hi James, who would you bench between Rodgers and Mavididi? Also between Robinson and Fass. Okay, so a little bit of confliction here in Robinson going up against Rodgers. I understand that. Yeah, I would want to therefore pick one of the Leicester players personally. I think the outright best choices is the non-Leicester players, unfortunately. But I get the wanting to play one of them. I would chance playing Mavididi, I think, on that. N. Brown says, hi James, was toying with Saka to Foden this week as I have no City and fancy Foden's chances. Reckon with the Saka, doubts it's worth doing. I'm not doing it unless something tells me definitively about Saka tonight that he's not travelled. And as said earlier on the stream, there's every chance that he's still not Foden that I go to. So it's a no for me. It's punty. It could work great. But he hasn't shown signs for me since his return that looks particularly likely. Panos says, hey James, free transfers, thinking of doing Trent, Diaz and Tavernier for Moreno, Foden, Mitoma. What do you think? Cheers. It seems like an odd time to buy Mitoma. Anyone who listened to the game review pod after game week 7 knows what I think about Mitoma, but I don't think I'd be diving there at this moment in time personally. So it's been no for me really. Again, I think Trent, Diaz fine for this weekend. Tavernier doesn't move you to any of the players you want. So 4 free transfers, Panos. Damien Bruns says, afternoon James, trust you are well, great content this week, thank you mate. Says, would you start Keane or Robinson this week, playing Trent, Gabriel and Lewis, benching Semenyo? I think there's an easy way out of this, and we don't know where we're at with Brentford, right? So Robinson, it's not impossible, it's probably unlikely, but it's not impossible that Michael Keane's a 1-pointer off the bench. So I do think Keane will play, by the way, but I think that would be enough to make me lean into going to Robinson. M. Brown says, also, you were great on Black Box. Have a good weekend. Thank you. I very much appreciate it. It's very, very difficult. You can never replace Mr. Mark Southerns, right? You can only be yourself. So I'm very aware that if you do that and you step into shoes of someone that as great, who we all admire, like Mark, like it's irreplaceable, right? So if it came off all right, I'm really pleased that people enjoyed it. JB said, loved Az's reaction to fixtures listed alphabetically. I didn't know either. What is going on? And he says, learn something new every day. You're the best now. But because I know that fixtures are ordered alphabetically. Play Welbeck or Rodgers this week. Love your work. Thank you. Welbeck. As out and out forward for Brighton. And you obviously watched that show last night. And I'm quite high on Brighton's possibilities this week, actually, mate. So, yeah, I would play Welbeck. And Mol Prasad says, best defenders under 4.9 million to bring in. Rico Lewis kind of starts there, doesn't it, really? Is Udogie dropped to that price? I feel like I want to check that right now. Bear with me. Because if Destiny Udogie has dropped to 4.9, I don't mind that. And guess what? He has dropped to 4.9 this week. Yeah. Consider that. Subject, I certainly wouldn't be ending up with like Udogie and Porro, by the way, but yeah, don't mind that. Destiny 4.9, nice one that. Failing that, I think it's all the way down to like Vandenberg and stuff, personally. Joachim Anderson, another one now, 4.3, and he has been past fit for tomorrow. Excuse me. I think that's a good one to consider as well. Rain Nori is going to be really popular in the next couple of weeks, but not a player you want to use this weekend, I understand. So there's a few choices for you there, mate. Next up is Roseanne Fleur says, Saka will not play versus Bournemouth. True news. I'm going to skip that, Roseanne, and wish you a very nice weekend. House Rave Trance says, hi James, Palmer and Semenyo to Foden and Brennan Johnson, then back to Palmer in 12. And you may want to, this is the thing, you may want to literally reverse those exact two transfers. So this is part of my dilemma with Haaland and Dibbling for Saka and Watkins. It's like, it's not just two transfers, probably going to be four. And I'm possibly buying back the exact two players that I might be selling now. And this sounds like a similar one. And you need to think way up. If you truly believe that Foden and Brennan Johnson over a clear, brilliant talisman like Palmer, and Semenyo, also a talisman, but I certainly understand tough fixtures. You might be benching Semenyo in some of these games. You need to add that. Oh, I'm going to bench Semenyo this week. I'm going to play this person instead. You need to factor that sort of thing in. I don't know if there's an impact here on captaincy. I'm going to guess probably not, as you probably own Haaland. So I'm going to guess probably not. But you need to factor in, if it's worthwhile, the amount of points extra you'll get for 4 transfers. If you're going to just completely reverse that exactly. And my conclusion very much was that, although I thought it probably would be worth it, maybe on points, very close for me under what I was considering, it would also deny me many things across the path over the next 4 weeks, like Cunha, as I'd said. Maybe, oh shit, I do want to go to Foden next week. It was going to deny me other things if I ended up taking that path. I don't know if that's going to be the case for you, but you'll also be stuck thinking, well, I need Palmer back. That feeling's not going to go away. My instinct on that is, you're in a position where you've got Palmer. Most people will want to get to him, hold with him. That would be more my take at the moment. Also, is Foden going to start 4 games over this period? Now, Palmer will, unless he gets injured or gets booked twice in that period. Josh Tellin says, hey James, plan on moving Jackson to Cunha to afford Palmer in from game week 9. So here we go. We've got someone who wants to buy Palmer next week for Newcastle at home. And yeah, I can understand that. Would you move this week and play Cunha versus City? Or keep Jackson versus Liverpool? Or would you suggest, Solanke for the next 4 instead? Josh, if getting Solanke cuts you off with Cole Palmer, I'm not going to advise you that. If it doesn't, yeah, get Don, mate. Anmol, I've already answered that question, mate. I'll give you the opportunity to remove your question because you're just delaying others, mate. Leo Travis says, Diaz to Palmer this week or next? The only thing in terms of the difference on that is you do know Palmer will play, right? You know that he's not going to get used in midweek for Europe because he can't, because he's ineligible, so it's 90 minutes. Diaz is highly unlikely to be 90 minutes. Diaz might not even start at all. I do think he will, by the way. It doesn't feel right, though. It doesn't feel right that Palmer's had 6 brilliant fixtures and now he's got Liverpool away, let's go and buy him. Doesn't feel right to me. That would bother me. It would bother me. But I also get it. Should you be influenced by your past? No, you shouldn't. You should make the decision based on what's in front of you now. I would buy Palmer. I was thinking about that from a poker perspective in terms of, like, your chips are in. It's like, oh, you don't have the value of the hand. You do have the value of the hand. You don't think you're going to win it, but it's worth putting a bit of money in because it's not going to cost you a lot to see the final card. It kind of felt like that when I was talking about it. Yeah, I would buy Palmer. I'd be regretting not getting that done earlier, though. I get it. Can't look backwards. Shitty answer, sorry. Alistair Hargreaves says 2 free transfers. What do I do with Diaz and Saka? Palmer and Johnson. There you go. Yeah, sure. Crack on, mate. Josh Davis says, hi James, hope you're well. No Haaland and plan to bring in and captain Foden for the next 2 weeks. My question is it riskier to give a punt like Foden the armband, or does it help mitigate? There's a lot of way that questions can lead. Is that in terms of help mitigate, i.e. its coverage of Manchester City? I've spoken about this a lot recently. Don't buy Manchester City for the sake of buying Manchester City. And buying Phil Foden's fine, right? What if you sit here this time next week and you don't think Foden's going to start? De Bruyne's back. I don't know. Is it improbable that Foden... Here's one for you. Foden plays 90 minutes Sunday. Foden plays 90 minutes against Sparta Prague on Wednesday. And then ahead of Southampton next Saturday, Pep goes, yep, KDB's in the squad tomorrow. What's your contingency? So you're trying to think a little bit outside the box. Now that scenario probably doesn't happen and it'll probably be perfectly fine. But I'd consider what the contingency is there on that. So is it riskier? It's definitely risky to sit in now and go definitively that you want to captain Phil Foden in game week 9. I don't think you can make that decision in advance. That would probably be my advice, just to think about that. And it's not saying you're wrong in any way, mate. Henry Melhush says, in order, who do I bench out of Rodgers, Smith Rowe and Vardy? I changed my mind about 30 times. Vardy, Smith Rowe, Rodgers. But probably advice on that, Henry, would be buy a goalkeeper and bench boost, mate. I'd consider it. I don't know what your team looks like, mate, but think about it. Feel free to tag me at Planet FPL Pod on Twitter if you want to do so. FPL team, my mate Pete's in, says, hey mate, hope you're good. Would you prefer Solanke and Havertz or Palmer and Strand-Larsen from next week? How long are we talking here, Pete? It feels like the answer has to be Palmer, I think. And what I would say about Strand-Larsen, who's a player I've looked at, because if I did go the Haaland route, I obviously wouldn't be buying Cunha, so I'd be looking at Strand-Larsen. There are players there, Strand-Larsen, João Pedro, Delap, Calvert-Lewin, Vardy. Cameron Archer's going to start for a little while for Southampton now at 5.0. There are people at that value who can be considered and used. And further down the line, Ross Stewart may even get back in and you just go with 2 up front. The right answer here, Pete, feels like saying Palmer is the priority, mate, I think. In my opinion. Lewis Cobb says Salah, Rodgers and Colwill to Foden, Johnson, Milenkovic for free. Sat at 3.3 million, so trying to push. Lewis, if you're trying to push, mate, I'm not going to tell you to pull. Nick Dent 1990 says, would you do Diaz and Semenyo to Foden and Dibbling for a hit? Probably not, no. It's certainly becoming a theme here. I can see the popularity of Phil Foden, and I understand it. I thought I was the fixture guy. Darren O'Neill says, hey James, great content. Smash the likes, people. If you had Haaland and Saka, who would you captain? It's not a contest, mate. It's not a contest. I think Haaland is so far away of anybody else over the next 2 weeks. So far ahead. So, yeah. It's not, people can be outcome based and it's, I did the right thing, Captain Saka last, game week 7. I spoke to Suj on our Patreon pod that morning. I said, there's no way that if I owned Haaland, I wouldn't have captained him at home to Fulham. And I would have if I owned him. And I wouldn't have regretted it either. Okay, outcome's outcome. Certainly wouldn't have regretted the decision on that. And neither did Suj, by the way. No, Haaland clear, mate. Not even close. Not even close. Outcome might be different, but it's not even close looking at it as a projection, mate. Remember if Saka's going to start? Do we or don't we? Matt Stacey says Diaz to Johnson or Bruno, have 2, 3 or hold. It's Johnson at the moment, isn't it, mate? Hunter Serene says sell Havertz or Solanke, need a Spurs player. I'm worried about Havertz' injury. I presume that's meant to be sell Havertz to Solanke. Listen back to the first question I answered, Hunter, on the stream. Best of luck to you. FPO Uproar says, yo James. Hello mates. Shit Keep says, hi James, thinking of doing João Pedro to Solanke and Salah to Son. What are your views on Son right now? I want Palmer in 9 and willing to move from Saka to get him in. Any Son alternatives instead? Yeah, Palmer. I presume you can't do that. That's fair enough. I've spoken about Son, so I'm not gonna go in that circle again. Pedro to Solanke is great, but I presume you probably need Salah to Son to do that. I probably would go Foden over Son for this next short period. But I wouldn't look at either of those two players as long-term picks at this moment. I'd be thinking, and it's fine to think short-term and flip them to something else. I probably would go Foden over Son at this moment. Harry Baker says, hi James, thoughts on 2 free transfers, Havertz and Semenyo to Solanke and Johnson. It's all coming for top. My deadline stream is going to be really fun tomorrow, isn't it? Tottenham this, Tottenham that. I might end it early because I'm going to Spurs anyway. So also play one out of Milenkovic, Smith Rowe and Rodgers. Smith Rowe for that for me. The movement of buying in Solanke and Johnson is perfectly fine, mate. Dilajit says, good afternoon, James. Hope you win it all. Non-FPL question. What is your regular Nando's order? I took my boy Harry for a Nando's last week. After taking him to Smith's toy store. Pure bribery, obviously, to get him some Hot Wheels. I am generally probably a half chicken kind of guy, throwing some wings on the side as well, corn on the cob chips. That's me. Coke refill, obviously. Lemon and herb, which I'm telling you that the one I had in that Nando's last week was a little bit spicier than a lemon and herb. Ricky Young says, are you a fellow Chick King lover? Come you Spurs? Of course, Ricky. Yes, the problem with Chicking is, and I'm taking Nico, for those who don't know, our editor, I'm taking him to the game on Thursday against AZ Alkmaar. I bought him a ticket because I'm a nice guy, and I would like to take him to Chicking. We've got to be there so early. I mean, even for that, even for like Europa League game, we need to be there at 6 o'clock. That's the problem. Queue is too long, unfortunately, which is nobody's fault. It's the best fried chicken in the world, and I won't be told different. And people say, well, it's good to eat round the ground, James. You've got this brilliant new space. I'm like, yeah, the fried chicken shop, mate. Justin Diaz says, please smash the like button and subscribe. Thank you, Justin. I see we passed over 17k subs this week, which is nice, and thank you for your support, everyone. I'm going to cover 2 more because I did say 255 and it is 255 now. So Justin Gooch says, hi James, hope all is well. Looking for some advice on needing to bench one of Jackson or Semenyo. Neither great this week, but what are your thoughts? I think there'll be goals in Liverpool-Chelsea, mate, so that'll answer the question. And Austin Laley, hi James, would you start Aina or Mikalenko this week? Also planning on rolling this week. Should I still do it if I have Saka and Diaz in my team? It's probably a flip a coin on those two defensive guys. Based on my predictions, the answer is Mikalenko, but I think the models and odds would probably give favouritism to Forest, I imagine, in terms of defensive clean sheet probability. So I think the right advice is probably to say Ola Aina. I think it's very close between the two. And part of the question is, should I still do it if I have Saka and Diaz in my team? Thanks. Also plan on rolling this week. Yeah, Saka Diaz, fine, mate. Yeah, as kind of covered for plenty of others. Saka's probably staying for me, subject to spotters in Bournemouth tonight, possibly. Although I wouldn't be at all surprised. Genuinely, heads up now. Oh my God, Saka wasn't spotted at the hotel. Like, didn't we have that bullshit with Raya a couple of weeks ago? And I realised it was a home game. But yeah, don't be surprised if like they stop off and put Saka in a different car. I mean this seriously. I really think Arteta thinks to those lengths. I wouldn't be surprised. That said, it probably would make me go, okay, I might need to do something about this. But unless there is something like that, I'd be fine and reasonable with it. Diaz is a dangerous choice. I do think Gakpo is a very serious threat to him. I do think Diaz probably starts this weekend. I think you will probably be okay to roll with both players. I'll leave it there, guys. For those who have not got through to your questions, apologies. If you want to tag me, that's tag me, not DM me, because people still do it every week. The problem is when I open my DMs for people asking FPL questions, they think it's a gateway to do it every single week. And you know what? That's what Patreon's for. If you want to support the show, it's patreon.com/planetfpl. If you'd like to tag me on Twitter, you can at Planet FPL Pod and ask your question there. I will answer it for you before the end of the day, probably as soon as I can. For advanced and intermediate plus tier patrons, your team news stream today is at 5:30 p.m. UK time. The deadline stream is scheduled tomorrow for 10 a.m. It might start a little early and it might finish a little early before deadline as well, unfortunately. The train situation for me to get to White Hart Lane tomorrow is not particularly great, so I might bail a little bit early, but there will be a deadline stream tomorrow. It may even start a little early, possibly. In terms of content next week, it's not all definitive and decided, but I can tell you it will certainly be Clayton and James show Wednesday. It might not be Ask James next Friday because I believe the deadline is next Friday, so I might have a little juggle around. Clash of Correspondence is scheduled for next Thursday. That's Chelsea versus Newcastle with Gary Mansell and Simon Bibby, and Suj will be back with me for the Game Review podcast on Monday. But please smash a like, hit the sub button, and for the benefit of those on the audio cue music, please man child.